Now, let's quick talk about Trump before I let you go. I mean, obviously, he had his interview with Tucker Carlson that premiered on X, formerly known as Twitter. And there were a lot of amusing topics that came up specifically about, his fellow candidates on stage, how he was not going to take the stage because why would he subject himself to 2 hours of harassment? And Tucker Carlson had brought up things like, are we going to have discourse given the outcomes? How do you think this played to Trump's advantage or disadvantage with the American people?
Well, I think there were pros and cons to this, and there were good and bad reasons for Trump to not debate. Now, a lot of people wanted to see Trump debate. Um, again, we know what Trump's positions are on a variety of issues. He's done all this before, but also having been president for 4 years, this is what he's going to do. Now, things change, and sometimes you want to change your position on things. It certainly back at the end of Trump's presidency, we were starting to deal with the COVID situation. And so he's been criticized for some of the things that he did at that point, although what we knew at that point was also different because apparently we weren't being told everything we needed to in terms of, both the virus itself and also in terms of how to deal with it, whether it's masks or the isolation, and people are pushing back on that. And it's in the news again now. And so it's going to be a different situation for Trump to come into should he become president again. And people would like to know that. So that's a reason for him to have wanted, or what people wanted him to debate. His perspective is saying, look, I'm leading in the polls by 20, 30, 40 points, just depending on the poll. Why should I debate at this point? Now, that's kind of the attitude that an incumbent might have. And that's what Biden is basically saying, that even though in some polls, RFK Jr. has pulled in the near 20%, and Marianne Williamson has gotten close to 10%. And that's pretty significant for an incumbent president, for two candidates that really wouldn't normally be considered serious. And yet he's certainly not going to debate. He's the incumbent. Why should he? So Trump's kind of taking that position, and that makes a certain amount of sense. It also makes sense that he doesn't debate because there's a certain concern that, given that he doesn't have much of a filter sometimes, especially when he's speaking off the cuff, that he could get himself in additional legal trouble. That Pence could be a witness against him in Trump trials. So is there I saw some lawyer, an online lawyer. So, I think he does legal stuff, but you can take it for what it's worth. But he was basically saying the potential for being accused of witness intimidation. Well, maybe that's not that much of a stretch, given some of the things that he's already being accused of, or just saying things that would violate one judge's or another requirement to not be talking as much about the trial. And clearly he would, and people would probably bring that up, and he would be limited in what he could reply without getting himself in additional legal trouble. So in that sense, it's probably not a bad idea for him to have avoided it. Also, and this is kind of the downside though for Trump, is that by not having him on the stage, and even though Trump came up in a couple of the questions, Trump not being on the stage gave everybody else an opportunity to shine that they wouldn't have had. That if Trump had been on the stage, he would have dominated as he did in debates previously. Things would always come back to him, and he likes to be the center of attention anyway. And he certainly would have been had he been on that stage. And so as a result, he wasn't there. Everybody else got a bit of a chance to either do well for themselves or sometimes not, but at least they had that opportunity. So it's kind of a little back and forth, but it's all probably going to be forgotten because, as we're talking today, Trump's going to go in and be arrested in Georgia for the indictment there. And so we'll be seeing his mugshot, no doubt, later in the day. And this will be the talk for the next several days, and the debate will by and large be forgotten.